Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I've got my winter TBR for you. So I like to do seasonal TBRs on this channel rather than monthly ones, and if you saw my autumn TBR you'd know that already. I will be updating you guys on my autumn TBR at the end, so do stay tuned for that if you're interested, but let's just jump into the books. I've no idea how many I have for my TBR today, so it's pretty ambitious. We'll kind of jump in. I always pick a few non-fiction and a few classics books for my TBRs as well, so I'm going to run through those first and then jump into the more kind of contemporary and modern literature. Non-fiction book number one that I want to get to is Julian Baggini's How the World Thinks, A Global History of Philosophy. I've already technically started this one. I started it for non-fiction November, and it's a sweeping look at the history of philosophy, specifically looking at non-Western philosophy, because a lot of the emphasis on philosophical thought in Western culture is from a Western background. So this is looking at some of the Eastern practices as well as the more oral traditions of some of the African cultures. It's going to be really interesting. I've read the introduction, but it is definitely heavy going, so it's going to take me a little while to get through it, hence why it's going to drift into winter. I also want to get to Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by, is that Yuval Noah Harari? This is, as the name suggests, a really sweeping look at the history of humankind, going back from kind of Neanderthal and the sort of beginnings of Homo sapiens as a species all the way up to the modern day, and the major revolutions that occurred for us to reach where we are. I technically started this a very long time ago, but I ended up putting it down for too long and I need to kind of go back to the beginning and restart it. I wanted to prioritise getting to it in non-fiction November, but that didn't happen because who actually manages to do their TBR prioritisations properly? So hopefully I can get to it in the next few months. If you saw my autumn TBR, you know that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was on that list, and I haven't managed to get to it at all the past few months. I've been reading a lot of modern classics instead. I also started Mary Shelley's Frankenstein for Spookathon and ended up putting it down because I wasn't really taking most of it in. So I've downloaded the Monster Collection from Audible, which contains both of these as well as Bram Stoker's Dracula, and my intention is to get to all three of them within the next few months. So I do have copies here. I don't have Dracula, but I'm going to be doing these in audiobook form. I have two books in e-reader form that I'm really determined to get to. One of them is Mortal Engines by Phillip Reeve. I think this might fit in with the readathon that I have coming up at the end of December. This one has been made into a movie recently. It's a high fantasy, crazy world. Cities can move and like absorb other cities. There's a whole plot to do with revenge and families. I don't really know what happens in it, but I'm really excited by it. And then there's also The Invisible Library by Deborah. I forgot to check your surname. It's here. This one is one that has been mentioned to me a few times. I don't really know too much about it, but it's supposed to be quite a short read, and I do have a few very long haul flights planned in December, so I'm hoping that I can get to both of these on those rather than having to carry physical books with me on the plane. I can just have my e-reader. Right, long list of physical books to go through now. Book number one that I really want to get to is Katherine Rundell's The Rooftoppers. Sorry, there's no there. Rooftoppers. This is set in France. It's a book I want to get to for my book world tour. It's specifically set in Paris, and it's to do with an orphan who ends up on the run, and she travels to the rooftops of Paris to kind of escape, and there she meets a boy who is a tightwire artist. For those of you who don't know, I am a circus instructor, have been a performer in the past. Tightwire is one of the specialisms that I have, one of the props that I've done in the past as well. So this looks really interesting, and it's quite short, and I think it might be YA, but don't quote me on that. So it looks like a really fun, light-hearted read for this winter time period. I've got a bit of an obscure one for you now. This is The Book of Dead Authors by Emmeline Rees. This is a thriller slash literary fic where a very critically acclaimed author is found dead, and suddenly a bunch of other authors have to go into hiding because they're worried that they're next. I know very little about it. I picked it up for free from a secondhand bookstore where I have an arrangement with them because I've donated so many books in the past. It looks like fun. I've never heard of it at all. I think it's got like 20 ratings on Goodreads, if that. So this could be really, really entertaining. One that is far more well known than either of those is Artemis by Andy Weir. So Andy Weir is the guy who did The Martian, which is one of my favourite books. I think it's a phenomenal read, so I'm really hoping that this one will be just as good. And I'm trying to actively read more authors who I've read before that I've enjoyed, because I have a tendency to just go for new authors and completely ignore the back catalogue or new work of ones who I've enjoyed in the past. This one is Moon rather than Mars. Something to do with a crime on the base that is on the moon. I don't really know too much. I know it's a thriller. Then I have Rosewater by either Tade Tade Thompson or Tade Thompson. I think that could go either way. This is a sci-fi set in, I think, South Africa, and it's to do with like an alien biodome that is there. It's set in the future, proper sci-fi. The Rosewater is the town on the edge of the alien biodome, and I think it's the interactions between the two. This was mentioned by Jean, Bookish Thoughts, a bunch of other people actually who I watch, and I can't remember who exactly anymore, sorry about that, but it got mentioned by quite a few different people and it looks really cool, and I love the idea of sci-fi but not set in a western country that I know really well. Another book that I want to get to is Neal Shusterman's Dry. So this is about a dystopian future where the taps have run dry, and it's about the aftermath of that, specifically focused on one family. I think it's a teenage boy, no, teenage girl in that family, her and her younger brother. This is a YA book. It's one of the few YA books on the list. Picked it up spur of the moment in Heifers. I've heard quite good things about it, and Neal Shusterman is the same person who wrote Scythe, which does really well and has got a lot of positive reviews, so I'm quite hopeful for the writing style. A total spur of the moment one that I have is 15 Dogs by Alexis. Now, my mum actually bought this for me the last time we went shopping. She caught sight of it out of the corner of her eye and thought that it looked really, really interesting. So this one is about the Greek gods Hermes and Apollo argue about what would happen if animals had human intelligence. So they gift human intelligence to a bunch of dogs, and then it's just the chaos that ensues from there. It sounds crazy. I love the Greek gods. I think they're so much fun. So I think that this is going to be really, really entertaining, and it does fit a few prompts for a readathon that I have coming up. So I'm hopeful that this one I'm definitely going to get to. Talking of spur of the moment, we have a very cheap and cheerful one I picked up from The Works. If you are UK based and looking for a cheap bookstore to go to, The Works is fantastic. So this one is called Deep Storm by Lincoln Child. Look at that cover. Is that not just like your classic like action movie style cover? It reminds me of just so many like disaster movies out there. This one is a former naval doctor gets called to a an oil rig because they think that they've found evidence of Atlantis, apparently. It just sounds crazy and wacky. A lot of the books that I'm going for the next few months are a little bit ridiculous. I'm not really looking for anything too heavy, apart from maybe 1 or 2 titles in it, because I just need something a bit light-hearted, and I think that is the case for a lot of people in winter. You just want to go for something that's a bit cheerful, a bit fun, because it's dark outside, it's cold everywhere, everything gets a bit grumpy. I just want to be entertained. So this sounds really entertaining. I love the grouchy former army person who gets dragged into wacky craziness. I'm hoping there's going to be some ridiculous science in this. And I love the idea of Atlantis. Atlantis is a great Disney movie. So all in all, this sounds like fun. Another one on my list is V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic. Now this is the book 1 in her London series. Yeah, there's like different kinds of London and they have different levels of magic. I have read Vicious, which I didn't particularly like. I know it's almost sacrilege to say that here on BookTube. Everybody raves about her writing style. Vicious really didn't do it for me, but I don't know whether it was just that particular plot didn't resonate. So I want to try her again. I like magic, I like magical realism, I love different magic systems. This sounds like it might be more up my street, so I'm hoping that this one will redeem V.E. Schwab in my mind. Because one that is guaranteed to be a lot heavier than a lot of the ones previously mentioned is Frankenstein in Bahgdad by Ahmed Saadawi. This is a kind of retelling of the Frankenstein myth, but it's set, as the name suggests, in Bahgdad, looking at victims from the war going on there. Now my plan is to get to Frankenstein first and then read this one. I've heard from people that it does get really harrowing and intense in place, but it sounds so interesting and I love the idea of the retelling, and I'm, again, with my book world tour, trying to read more books set in other countries, so I think that this one will be a really interesting look at war from a very different kind of style and perspective. A cute, quirky one that not many people will have probably heard of is Familiar Things by Sok-Yong. This is described as a vibrant and enchanting novel from one of Korea's most celebrated writers. It's something to do with a 14-year-old boy who comes to an island which is actually a vast landfill site, and he is scavenging to make a living, and then out one night he spots these kind of freaky lights, and I think that there might be some kind of fairy magical realism element, and it's going to get a little bit quirky and folklory in places. I'm hoping. I could be completely wrong about that. Another book that I want to get to is Lady of the Night by Mayra Santos-Febres. This is a book set in Puerto Rico, and it is about a woman who becomes a madam and runs her own brothel, and she is apparently a merciless businesswoman. That just sounds awesome. Like, from there, we barely need to go any further. This cover's gorgeous. I want to get to know this character. I'm totally on board with all of this. It's a look at the Caribbean and the Second World War and family and relationships around there. The whole thing is just ticking so many of my boxes for historical fiction, books about the Second World War. A book that most definitely is not obscure and got a lot of hype this year is George Sanders' Lincoln in the Bardo. This is the Man Booker Prize winner from 2017, I'm pretty sure. I did try and start this one once on audiobook, but the formatting is really, really weird and does not suit an audiobook format personally. There's a lot of quotes in here and a lot of disjointed writing. It plays a lot with like the format of the novel and how things are laid out on a page, and I do think it's something that you need to see visually rather than hear to appreciate. And the final book on my winter TBR is Who Are You By? Vox by Christina Dalcher. So this has been making some waves. It is about a dystopian future where women are limited to 100 words per day, which I would really struggle with. Like, you can see how much I waffle. Several people who I follow on BookTube have said that it's been amazing. I read a lot of dystopian fiction. I read a fair amount of feminist fiction. This seems to tick both those boxes, so I'm really keen to see what it is like. I've heard people link it back to Naomi Alderman's The Power, which I really enjoyed at the beginning of the year, so I'm super keen to get to this one and just sort of jump in and see how it deals with those kind of topics. So that is my TBR. There were actually 20 books in total on it, so going a little bit more ambitious for the upcoming months rather than autumn's TBR, but my plan is to go less off-piste from this and try and stick to these books over the next few months. And I do have some really long stints over Christmas where I'm going to get a chance to do loads of reading. If you are curious as to how my autumn TBR went, I managed to read 10 out of the 12 books. So the only ones I didn't get to was The Ice by Leilani Poole and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Like, subscribe, comment, etc, etc. You know the drill, guys. And have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!